quickly. We're live? We should be live. There we go. Oh god, it's not my auto ad fix it, but it's going to be going every like 2 minutes. That's not good. Right, okay. My ad thing's working. Let me post this everywhere. I'm sure there's a way I can make it organized on Blue Sky. Let's drop it into Town Square on there. I'll have to drop that one to channel. I'm sure there was a place for streams. There is. Got to stick in that one before. Oh, that one's cleared. Video image. And finally name. But yes, it's post that. I'm sure there's a way to set up my Blue Sky so it automatically yes, let me very quickly toss in my I'll go for pass. Why not? Just putting this down the background. And if anyone's here yet, I'm just gonna run the ad to claim auto get starting ads. Oh, I need to get past that. So yeah, we'll wait for that to finish. Oh, does that mean if anyone looks at my things that just take you to my Twitch now? Answers now because I quickly get myself. Okay, so yeah, let's get going a bit. Let me come back here. Do that again. Okay, we've got this here. I'll wait for my thing, and then we'll get in very soon. Another 45 seconds, and I'll do a proper like start thing. I never actually got around to editing the stream from yesterday down yet, so that will be something to do. I see this one. Hopefully, you know, attempt 4 going to get a bit longer than the previous 2 attempts. But why am my eyes struggling a lot with my eyes? My YouTube Studio. Let me just try and mess with that one a bit. No, that's not well. Where's my setting? Oh no, now it's working. I'm looking at it here. Well. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hello and welcome to attempt number 4 of the Minecraft 1.12 hardcore advancement challenge. So yeah, our goal in this is do every advancement in the game in 1.12 in hardcore. Once that's done, we have the challenge we consider complete. However, every time someone subscribes, someone donates £10, or I die, a new mod is added. If it's a sub or donor, that person chooses. If it's to death, everyone in chat can just toss out a mod, and we'll put it on a wheel, and we'll add whatever wheel gets. And advancements added by mods do count. We have to do all of those as well. As you may be able to tell from the title screen, we have Ice and Fire. Oh yeah, of course. We'll say that, guys. Let's see. Cool. The mod list is working. The bot is up. So yeah, if you want to see the mod list, you can see it there. Then we've got 4 right now. It's Ice and Fire, Galacticraft Legacy, new TARDIS mod, and Morph. So yeah, with that, let's do attempt 4. Attempt 4. That's gonna be hardcore again. Actually, no, let's just go pure randomness. Let's not even bother entering seeds. I was going to say if anyone in chat wants to toss out a seed, but no, let's see that. And yeah, we'll see how we go this time. Oh, hello, Radiance person. Yeah, thank you for following. That's very much appreciated. And how are you doing today? And oh, look, we would have got advancement. How are you doing today? So I just had a bowl of soup, of tomato soup, and my throat's a little bit funny from it. to try and knock off. Oh, you make good. That's good. I'm doing pretty good as well. So we're getting back into the whole stream thing. I hadn't streamed in a while yesterday with some help from mine. We had a really nice big stream. Getting this challenge off the ground. Thanks to Island, we have a terrible mod called Ice and Fire. And I call it terrible. It's a good mod. It's not terrible in the quality of the mod is bad. It's terrible in that it's hard as balls. With many a dragon and fantasy creature, we'll have to tame and slay and all sorts for advancements. So that's a whole thing to be concerned about. That's quite true. A dragon did very nearly break into my hovel. Okay, got some nice pigs. Won't try and claim him as a pet this time. Oh wait, I say that one kind of adopted us. It was kind of a cat distribution system style event when Food the pig was oh my god, I'm fairly sure that will kill me. So I won't fight it yet. It's not as tough as a dragon. It's killable if I had a bit of gear. But I do not. Actually, can you not tame them by like doing something? Can you tame them by just like looking at them? Or does that get them to kill you? It's a bit early in attempt to get murdered. Let's not mess with thing. Oh, fuck. That's a side man. Yeah, welcome to a man that added the new tires mod, thinking it was a nice thing to do, and it turns out this version has Cybermen in it that do a decent chunk of health. We can live out of this mountain a bit. This will be where our hovel is. Sure, it's not a very nice landscape, so we're probably going to want to move on relatively quickly for the sake of we build an actual house. So we'll build an actual house. I haven't put an actual house in the last couple of attempts because it didn't last very long. Oh, but I can fucking make a stone pick immediately. Let's go, yeah. So yeah, where's the little hole? Yeah, ironically, I have not been here. In fact, I got attacked by a thing from Ice and Fire and I fucking killed it. When I got attacked completely unexpectedly. I had no idea what gonna happen. Is it dark? Yeah, it's just a gloomy biome. Yeah, we'll get rid of this. Yeah, look, we have good rubbish disposal facilities here. Oh god, there's more of them. Well, I'm just gonna ignore them and hope that they ignore me. It's the best I can hope for right now. Yeah. No, I'm not looking at them. They're not looking at me. But chill, we're not gonna get murdered immediately by a big fucking hippogriff. It's completely fine. I am chill, they are chill. We're all chill here. You don't need to be attacked by a big bird thing. Right, yeah. Okay, yeah, we got it. We'll very quickly just do that. Well, so we've got a few sticks, I guess it won't. This I'll pick up as well. More, yeah, I made the door already. Okay, we've done that. We got a door to go there. Yeah, no, we're going in. It's going okay. Right. And then we'll just have to cut out the hole. I have to go on the hunt for. I have to go on the lamb for lamb. That's not really how those words work together, but fuck it. I have to go run around a bit, find some sheep, hopefully, to get a bed. I guess we'll make a stone axe. We can also use as a weapon. Simon has unfortunately gotten a head start on fucking up my food situation. There were a bunch of pigs there. We can probably just head out and a bunch of them really quick. Alright, you. Right. This will be how we fight. And we'll turn the rest into torches. Cool. And I'll just also toss a few torches out the front of my house so we don't get mobs directly outside, probably. There's a lot of SS also fine. Right, now let's really head out and see what. Okay, there's a swamp there. That's good. It's slime. Easy grasp. I might need to pick up some of those mushrooms for the sake of food source. And I need the brown mushrooms in here. I'll get some sticks, so it'd be nice. Yeah, get some sticks. I meant more of a string. Yeah. Maybe could have another chill fishing adventure like we did before the dragon turned up and ruined my day. Yesterday. I could do something good. What else do we got? I guess we can just go to murder a bunch of pigs. That thing's probably not going to attack me. Imagine we go for the pigs first. Let me say that. Oh, I forgot. Right, we have the morph mod. You can become a pig now. I immediately forgot we have that mod now, so we can just do this. Oh. That'll be interesting later. Oh, maybe if we could kill a hippogriff then. How sturdy are these things? If we could fly, that would be so powerful. How sturdy do you reckon they are? Is it a bad idea to just swing it on with a stone axe? I guess I'd have to land first, huh? It's probably alright, you just swing it with a stone axe, anyway. You can like just for the ability to Now I'm gonna have to head back home and pull the furnace. We can put a rose bush outside as well if we can. There. Oh no, that's it. No, it wasn't quite here. Right, up we go. Oh, okay, yeah, we can now sprint. Let's just slowly make our way back to the house. Oh, hello. Big, thank you for your pork. Your contribution is very much appreciated. You have to go to the house where I can show off our new newest ability we unlocked. It won't be much of anything. I'm just absolutely decimating. Well, far more than decimating the pig population. Right, it's getting a bit dark. Might be getting a bit dark. Might speed up into the really gloomy biome here. Maybe we can brighten it up a bit with a rose bush. I mean, it's much better. We'll definitely not building our house in this biome. It's way too gloomy. Awful. Right. Furnace. Here's pork. Here's coal. Here's a little orchid for some reason. I guess I just picked up by accident. We didn't see any sheep about. Wait by the furnace so we can get our food. We're gonna have to get back into mining. I've done a lot of mining on the streams today and probably today because of needing to get geared up and then dying to stupid stuff anyway. Okay, we've got stuff. So yeah, we've got mods. Oh yeah, let me show you. So that's my skin without my head thing on some reason. My head thing's on, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, welcome to Here's a Pig. How do I accept that? No? Okay. Oh wait, is it? No, that's how you favourite it. Oh, I'm gonna have to go look for the keybinds real quick. Give me the controller thing. Morph. That's not right. Oh no.
Tell me, for whom do you fight?
I was like, what the fuck's that sound effect? Yep, there we go. I forgot I lowered that back down. Welcome to Gaia's Mendoza. I forgot I made that. I kind of regret it a bit. How do I select anything?
Eorzea's unity is forged on falsehoods.
Yeah, here we go.
Its city-states are built on deceit, and its fate
Give us half
is an instrument of deception. It is not but a cobweb of lies.
Yeah,
To
that's the
believe in
morph mod.
Eorzea is to believe
If I turn into like a bat, if I can kill a bat, I can get the ability to fly, or if I can kill other things and fly.
tribes often summon gods to
Yep,
fight in their
that's a mod we have. Hello,
Your
Pancake.
comrades only
You
rarely
can hear
respond,
Gaius van Belsar because of Aina.
which is strange, is it not?
Do, do, do.
Are the 12 otherwise engaged? I was given to understand
Yeah.
they were your protectors. If you truly believe them your guardians, why do you not repeat the trick that served you so well in Cartano and call them down?
Yes, I could become a dragon. It would be quite powerful if I could do that.
They will answer, so long as you lavish
Okay, having that music and running with the lo-fi in the background is a bit best.
Your gods
Let's see.
are no different from those of the beasts.
So yeah, welcome to the incredibly long memed on Gaius van Belsar speech from Final Fantasy 14 that I know
Eorzea's fate is bleeding
chosen to
red
play
blood.
for channel points. I forgot it was an option.
Nor is this unknown
But no,
to
Aina's here to
masters.
remind me of my
Which
terrible
begs the
decisions.
question, why do they cling to these false deities? What drives even men of learning, even the great Louis Soir, to grovel?
I mean,
at
the
their feet?
price has increased many times because of you.
The answer?
Because Aina once spammed it like 3
The
times.
strength to do
And I have no
otherwise.
way of disabling it once it starts.
For the world of man to mean anything, man must own the world.
You want to do me a favour? Get me a fucking Gunblade mod. If you want to do me a guy from Belsar.
Conflict.
I don't know if I don't know of one that exists, but it was something like that. That was interesting.
Settles. It is ever the strong who dictate the fate of the weak.
But you pick your next bad mod. You pick your next bad mod. You haven't even got your next good mod. Yeah.
Knowing this,
Come on.
when a single path is open to the infinite, that of false worship, a path which leads to innovation and death.
That's some weird
Only a
stuff.
man of power can rightly steer
Okay, now I want JI more.
civilization.
I think
In
that's
this land of creeping
I
mendacity,
need a bloody
that one truth will prove its
shovel.
salvation. Come, champion of
We'll just
Eorzea.
stick a crafting bench in here.
Face me. Your defeat shall serve as proof of my readiness to rule.
The amount of times I've run this fucking
It is
dungeon.
only right that I should
has
take
this
your
in.
realm, but none among you has the power to stop me.
Grab always there, hopefully not too much. So I can actually get through it. 108 nuclear got at some point. I don't know what advancements there are in there. I'm gonna say if there's no advancements, that's great. Unless I need this much power for it, in which case I'll kind of have to use it anyway. Okay, how much iron have we got here? Okay, no, we get 9. Good, good. I can make an iron hit. Thank God for that. That's gravel, fuck. Everyone. You ever see like clips of like a strip Minecraft streamers and it's just like, hey, you made weird fucking, you're trying to make weird things. I understand that a lot more now. Right, let's get some iron made, and we'll get an iron pick, and then continue our way down. I was waiting for that one. We'll go to the top, get remaining pork. If I make a chest up here as well just to hide my... Actually, is it daytime? If it's daytime, I might get some wood. Okay, cool. Oh, I didn't put enough pork in here. I'll make a single chest. I guess we definitely need to go and grab more wood after though. Right, we'll stick it with me to know that we don't need to carry around with us. It's a bit dark. I don't really want to go out there and truck with at least iron. Yeah, you know, we died a few times. We did die to a bunch of skellies once. We do want to avoid that again. So we'll okay, let's not make an iron hoe every time. One day I'm going to accidentally actually do that. It's sad. Right, we'll keep going down with stone, and then we'll try and just get some diamond. Maybe we'll get an attempt that goes beyond a single stream this time. Done it before. The first attempt was, and I accidentally deleted the water fire, which is why we're on which is why I went on to attempt 2, and now we're on attempt 4, which is certainly summer. I even bother with these extra ores, or should I just not? I should just ignore them and just go direct to like the diamond. I actually know what useful as tin, right? Is tin useful for anything? I mean, shield it. I don't know what it would be though. I'm gonna try and minimize my mining time by specifically only going for like iron and diamond and coal, and I might get a bit of gold. So. He's obviously thinking I'll need it eventually. Yeah, say look at all this copper. I'm gonna ignore it until I need it. Knowing when I need it might be a bit more difficult. Not having JEI. Yeah, not having a lot of wood kind of sucks hard. Alright, keep going. I'm trying to dig it this time so there's slightly more headroom, so I'm not bashing my head every time I go up or down. We'll have to see how that ends up going, but I think we can manage it. I mean, that's a very useful utility. I wouldn't be against it. You know, getting the good utilities, the JEIs, the whalers. You know, that's so that would be quite useful. That I have no idea how long it will take for me to get. You know, maybe we'll finish this whole thing in this attempt and just never have any more mods. Who knows? It seems unlikely, but we'll see. Okay, we've got this, so we'll just go with more iron pick. Should I get running out of fucking iron entirely? Okay, getting closer. I'm going to Y11 in case that's unclear. That's why I've got my that's why I have the overlay turned on. It's meant to be the best thing. That won't happen. Oh, ye of little faith. I'm often the last person to die in a Minecraft server. I just happen to have not things. Oh, you'll definitely have mods at some point. Okay, yeah, that's fair. Okay, oh, what's that? Right, let's be careful. I'll wait for it to rain a bit before I put that iron, and then we can keep going down. I guess we could just use this to go down further without having to dig as much as well. That's pretty good. How much iron have we got? We need another pickaxe at least. Not enough. We might actually start getting a earpiece. Nice. Oh yeah, I got 8. Okay. What we'll do is, as we're waiting for the lava, yeah, we'll smelt this up real quick. Just get that through. Yeah, so if I'm doing, the Magic the Gathering Arena ranked thing is reset. I finished at Platinum 4. I possibly could have got higher, but it was too close to the end of the season, and I didn't want to get pushed out and get less awards. So, yeah, I started that last night. I'm still in silver. Right now, I had like one game that went ridiculously long, but I had such high lifelink early on that he just couldn't kill me. I just slowly whittled down his dragons. He was going heavy on Tarkir in that deck. Right. Really want to make this into a chest plate, but I need to leave. I want to leave enough iron behind as well for the sake of making a second pickaxe when my first one runs out. You know, unless we find diamond, we're going to have issues of iron pickaxe have surprisingly little durability when you're actually using it repeatedly. Who knew? Right. Yeah. Alright, well, so like, no, that isn't even enough. I guess I can just do a helmet. I think at least have a left. Okay, I'll do that. But you, you. I've learned from how often I had to go and run away and find some more iron. Wait, what level? Wait, oh, okay. Speaking of diamond, that's probably the fastest I found it so far. Okay, we'll have a diamond pick soon enough. Got the door as well because why not? Hey, another utility we need at some point, backpacks. Some form of backpack mod, please. I beg. That's dead. Especially as we add more mods as well, it's going to be much bigger issues. Okay, now we're literally on the left where I wanted to strip line that anyway. We'll do that. We will just immediately make a, I'm not going to have much in the way of torches though. We'll do that. But yeah, what I will do, there you go, anymore. Got what I came for. We're gonna go back to the top in the hope of finding more wood. We're very low on it, really, and I would like to just get more. If it's light out, maybe go on a hunt for some sheep. That'd be quite nice. Get a bed so if we need to go outside, we can just sleep. And not have to worry about whatever horrors are unleashed on them. All the horrors seem to be available in the daytime that have been added so far, to be honest. Although I know there are Daleks in the Plasma, because yeah, I know there's a Dalek gunpick item which drops from Daleks, which necessitates there being Daleks, which concerns me. Because I imagine they might hit pretty hard. And if I would like to not just get insta fucking shot of nowhere. So we'll have to see how that one goes. Once we get our wood. Nice chill early stages, you know. Where I could just also die at any time. But you know, that's just life, right? You just die at any time anyway. Yeah. Nice comforting chill stream vibes. Reminding you of your impending mortality at all moments. Right. What the hell's down here, you know? I wish, I kind of want more. Okay, I'm gonna go too hard. I want to actually build a house in this one, so I want to get a house going a bit sooner. I'm probably like in the middle of the woods, maybe? Do you want to try and get a house? I think we need to get a bed first, though. But I'll say, let me, so yeah. Well, back. Okay, could make a diamond sword, and now I can iron sword specifically. To save on diamonds, because I'm not going on any major fight. I just want to be able to kill a few mobs. Yep. It actually take less hits of a stone fucking axe to kill a pig than a sword. That's crazy. Oh, let's test it on this guy if I can hit him. Okay, I think I already hit him with the sword. That was not a proper test. Oh, sheep. We'll use our last iron for this. And yeah, let's go grab a bunch of wool. A bed we can get going. Nice. There's more than enough in there. Yep, there we go. I'm gonna come and go chickens immediately because I wanna. You know, I've got to keep some animals that didn't. Oh, didn't mean that one. Yeah, so I guess probably some pigs at some point. I'm pretty sure you have got to breed the animals. Oh, I can become one now. I forgot that's a thing. Oh wait, if I turn myself into, actually no, then I got to kill chicken and sheep so I get their forms. That's why I'm gonna have to actually kill everything just so I have like form. So sheep, I wanted to keep you. I'll kill just a single chicken. There we go. Forms are useful to have. Eggs there as well, I don't know. Because yeah, chickens have a slow fall. So if I need to get down from somewhere high, I can turn into a chicken to jump down. Squids, underwater breathing. Yeah, squid. There we go. Okay, yeah, I have to actually now to get abilities. And kill a bunch of squid. Just that one. Go. Alright, go back to the hovel. I don't know exactly about our house. It's around here. No, yeah, if I turn to a squid on air, on the surface, I will start dying. Because, it has inverted air breathing. Oops. Right, let's, just a few apples here. Yes. Give me the apples. That's another thing. Hopping bottom pots would be nice, just for passive generation of wood. Similar. Into the hovel. There we go, and then we can mess around with we can do right here. I'm just gonna quickly go. So we can get some more stuff in here. No, I need you. Where's you and I? Yeah, you can stay. No, I somehow did that backwards. I'll keep dying normally. It's not like if I die, it's gone anyway. It's an incoming ad break, by the way, just a heads up to everyone. Unless you're not subscribed, you will have ads in a minute. From the automated system, I'll do that. I can't at one point until night time, so that's fine. So take a quick look for what I've got now. So yeah, chicken, that's okay, is that really? The only things for ability are those. What does the Cyberman give us? Okay, nothing with the same life, we can't do anything special. We just look like that. Squid will start drowning. Chicken will have slow fall. Which does make quite useful thing. Good. Tracking working? Okay. Tracking, temperamental. So we can put this on. Put some more of that. And we'll head back into the mines. Let's see how we go. We don't have not much coal. We'll if we find any coal, to go for it. I'm leaving all the other ores and just focusing purely on getting full diamond. Once we've done that, we can worry about other ores. I don't really know what I'm crafting until I have JEI. So let's see what we need to do for different advancements. So yeah, the advancements, you've got each base Minecraft one, you've got a couple of other, these ones are all base. Got a lot of farming stuff, adventure, go to certain places, kill certain things, whatever. Here, make some basic shit. Oh yeah, we have to go to do a moon landing and possibly to other planets. I'm not sure. And also a bunch of dragon bullshit and similar mythical creatures. So that's fun. That's what we're going to be dealing with. I probably should have got rid of my thing there. I guess we can pick up the redstone. I'm making an iron pick. 6 diamonds for the first thing, not bad. I had worse starting veins. It's funny when you just find, it's like, oh, I finally found diamond, it's just a single block. You can dig all around it, just like, oh, okay. Oh, fuck you too, game. Right, let's keep going, we'll get a bit more iron at least, that's nice. Let's keep going. I'll try and stick to I mean, it depends what I get. I'll see as I have more iron. I'll instead of making more gear pieces out of iron, or if I find a big cave, I'll smart up my iron and just go, yeah, okay, here you go. Just give it to go. Aluminium, it's not silver. If it was silver, I'd maybe get some smart it up, get a bit going. Just you can make gear out of it. It's strong against undead. As a lot of the base mobs in Minecraft are undead. That's, that's useful. I might go back to surface and just find surface coal. Because we don't have a lot. We're completely out of endurance. Not anything. Oh, that's at the bottom. Okay. back to the surface to mine coal off the awful stony mountain that we live in. So if we can see from there. I think so, right. I'll try to do the water bucket as well, just for the, you know, not dying how we died last time. When I had a water bucket, I just didn't scroll to it in time. Same problem that we had yesterday is happening again. Let me move the camera slightly. You can see me now if I'm leaning the way I like to lean when I play the game. I straightened up my camera and that was a mistake. You can see me again. Yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, given we might actually build a house in this one, has anyone got any like ideas on what sort of house you'd like to see? Any styles? One thing. About nice and ideal. Oh yeah, we'll sleep. See our bed now, and it will set our spawn, which is an advancement, I believe. It's always nice to get some down. Just spam that until it lets us sleep. There we go. Is that the ad starting or is that the ad ended? I think like that. Cool, no horrible monsters. We'll just go in, just grab all this. Nice. Okay. Let's go. There it is. Medieval maybe with the dragon, true. You two are playing a permadeath game. What are you? Are you playing Noita?
You don't make up for your sins in the church.
I know. That's the permadeath game you generally play.
Do it at home.
Yeah, call it.
You know it.
So yeah, I had a mod that makes Noita in Minecraft, but I'm thinking that sounds like a horrific experience. Alright, back down we go. Into the mines. As we dig the holes. We're doing it every time. Woman then. The list of mods you intend to add are just growing and growing and growing. At least we have the wheel to protect us. The wheel will protect. We're going to end up just creating... We'll create a little called the wheel or something to try and make it good choices for dev ads. It can't really help us for subscribe or donate ads, I suppose. Let's see, oh. Ooh. I have a shield. Right. I think it's time we smart the rest of that up. I'll make a shield and I guess boots. Wood for that. Oh no, I haven't. Let's get a shield. And then we'll make iron boots and just hope that that's going to be enough, I suppose. And then go and face the creeper that's just outside there. I could start mining in the other direction, but I want to go look at what's in the cave and look at some exposed diamond. I think we can take a single creeper. If we suddenly get mobbed by creepers and it turns out Ice and Fire adds like a creeper dungeon or some shit, they might be in a bit more trouble. Probably fine, right? She's got loads of eggs over here. Okay, to ravine. Dangerous places. Cord out, which is nice. I'm here. Thank you. few things about actually. Oops. Directions I could go. I'm gonna get this coal. Just I always find you need fucking so much coal. I say it every time. You need so much coal in this game. I mean, once you've got a few things, you can probably automate it. In fact, I don't know if I have enough mods installed that I could automate like charcoal production. That would be nice. Go up there. But I'm gonna have to go pure coal, iron, diamond. Gold doesn't really add anything to this. So I could come to a bit later. I don't know what materials I need, so I'm just ignoring them all. Wait a bit more. Torches. Got a bit of coal, got a bit of wood. Welcome to Chill Mighty Stream. Where we dig and dig and then we die and then we dig and dig again and then we die. I know. One day, hopefully. Okay. I would say having Whaler would be great because half the ores in this are just like the default ore texture, that white. And that's just. I can't tell the difference between all of these things. Look, what's that? Is that aluminium? Is that nickel? Is that silver? It's tin. God. Do that, get I hopefully get to get a chest plate. I'd preferred to making a way out of diamond, but alas, we have yet to find enough. There should be enough iron to be able to be fully geared up in that though. Ooh, ooh, bad. That is half my health. I panic placed the fucking. I just panic placed my finder's barrow stick. That sounds wrong because I said mining it and realised. So yep, no, I'll just. Saving as well, because I know that's used for crafting kind of pain to find. So I know that's useful. My thing just stopped. Oh, YouTube, don't pause my bloody lo-fi mix. Right. This. Oh wait, they never actually made a leg. What happened to the leggings? They just drop them somewhere? They're not. Just dropped them. What happened? I'm sure I had some. What happened? They just dropped. Oh, I'm confused. Oh shit, yeah, there's no stopping now. Let's get away from what's left side. It's not good. I don't like that they can just fucking do half my health. How's Amanda's pick fucking killed me, almost killed me more than Iron does? It's insane. See what I need. Oh no, I need. My fucking boot still got that. Stay away because that fucking Cyberman. It's hard. I'm concerned it might do more damage when I'm armored because I'm got metal that conducts it or some shit. That's my current fear. Let's hope it's not well-rounded. Otherwise, I'm certainly going to be taking a lot more damage from it when I put these on. There we are fully suited and looted. And we're going to go this way because it's away from the site. Find a like diamond, tuna, there's a group here, there's a couple groups here. but I know it's just for target ship. That's all I know about that Cinnabada. Turn 3 off and like, oh, this should be fine. Everything's so much more tense in hardcore. You know, I don't normally I don't die that often in Minecraft in general. That's why it's like, yeah, we can do a hardcore challenge. Don't mind if I'm on fucking attempt 4. It's fine, we'll do it eventually. I will make it all the way through this. We will not stop making attempts until we succeed, or until we have to like remove the mod because the game won't load. I don't have to get that much rest. I don't have enough habit bit on me if I just did it. Fuck, that's really awful. You know what? I know what I'm gonna do. Let's get back. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make a bucket. Once we've got a water bucket, we can cover that lava and murder that stuff, man. So it's not a threat anymore. I'm scared he's just gonna come around that corner. Well, no, like, cave soldier's gonna come running down there or some bullshit. To be fair, we killed it last time we had a cave troll. It was completely expected, and we did manage to win. It didn't hit us at all. So you know, over there. We're approaching the 11th time we were in attempt number 2. So you know, hopefully that's. Why not? Right. There's water there that I can pick up. Yeah. That's fine, I'll take that. I don't need this electronic chip. More coal here, but I don't want to fuck with it really. I'm not going to navigate yet. No, get the iron though. I know I can obsidian. I'm not really trying to get it. If the game would like to just reward me a bit now. This is oh no, I'm getting all these water streams, you know. A little bit now. Got over there, a bit of silicon, I guess, but. Let's get more lapis. I don't think you can use that much of enchanting. I don't know if it's used for anything else. Silicon again, I know it's a good thing to get. In this direction. I'll pick on a bow okay. Dumb idea. Oh fuck, give me here. No. Oh, yeah, I didn't also I can become an enderman now. Off it. I don't know what that icon means. That might be undead. It might be that I actually can't touch water. Let me just stay here a second as I heal. No, completely fine. Completely under control on antiburn. I'm gonna just kind of add because I'm gonna be build. I should just return surely. Hello. Oh, right, I need to get back to the thing. Wait, it does? Hold on. How much is that? Let me see. Oh, I don't think it does. Seems to have the sound out. I'll go back to my normal thing so I can go past the water. I can find it. So let's get back through here a little. If I can. Oh. Wait, bat. Where's bat? There is it. I'm here, bat. Fuck me. I've got to do it without falling in the lava. There we go. You can fly now. We have like barely any health, but we're in that form. Fly. Let's go. There's a lot of coal here. There you go. Yeah, now what I can do. Oh, there's some cool stuff. It's a bit dangerous. I don't know if shit's still aggro. Stuff's still aggro on you when you're morphed. I've been pinged. Where I've been pinged. So the guy that's that on that's something else. Okay. Cool, we're fine. Oh, it's good. I can't fly properly. Hello? Is it just like a light jet? What's my... Why can't I fly? If I had to fly, it's saying we used to be able to. They nerfed the bats, cannot fly anymore. I'm supposed to have flight. So like it's a way of activating it. Next to the next mod pick, some other JI. Oh, cool. Yeah, okay. Well, don't forget, you can always do that. But yeah, like a specific control. Do I have any morph controls at all? Because I didn't see it before. Should I get the galactic map? Oh, cool. Oh, I don't like how many planets there are on that map. I should actually not fly. That's so fucking bullshit. What the fuck? That's like that's like that thing everyone does in this mod. You turn into a bat and you fly, not just jump the same height as you can as a person. The fuck? Can a chicken even give you fucking slow fall? Hold on. It's supposed to morph just like fucked. That's always what I do in mod packs before, where I used to morph mod. Let me check if the chicken actually slow fall above water so I don't die of fall damage. If it doesn't, then morph is just like worthless to me. Okay, so you have slow fall still. Why don't the bats work? The fuck? Baffling. Battling. No, wait, that's a different thing. Fuck. Right, let's go back to that cave we're in. There's more places we could potentially have gone. few more touches. Go. We do have an endpoint now, which is interesting. I wonder what we can craft with that in this pack so far. Some stuff. Here we go. Anything else of interest? Oh, that's kind of it. It's cool, I mean. Yeah. I'm so mad that bats don't work. That is my favourite thing to do in Mothmod, is to turn into a bat. And then you have the power of flight. There's something between flight is not allowed. I wonder if it's a config. I'm gonna look in the config options for the fucking pack and find out. More. If it's like a specific thing, just open it in Notepad. Open. Fly is not disabled. Abilities are not currently existing in 1.12.2 abilities. I think it's just unfinished, honestly. That's incredibly annoying. It's not even a disable in the config thing. Why developers of Morph 1.2? Why would you take away the beautiful bat ability? You just made me murder a bat for no reason. What the fuck? Okay, everything's not fine. I don't really have to hide it. Diamond now. Oh, shit. Instant. There's a Renderman down there. I don't really want to fight with them here. Stay in this form and go. And I just go back to my strip mine, I guess. Chunky wood dying. Oh, it's more in there, fuck. No, I just want diamond now. That's my full set of down gear, and then we can start messing around with more things. Fuck. Okay, so hear it? Come on. Uh-oh, I'm gonna be long. You're not gonna... I mean, I can get it like this if you want. Just verbally the second time bastard. Right. Oops, no, I didn't do that. No! Wait, water! Right now I have to go find out where's... Oh, is it all the way up there? Right, we'll just dig our direction, I guess. Is that silver? It is. When we know it's better against. Got it. Tell you what, fight back again. Hello. Hello, I'm back. You know, I died in real life. That's definitely what happened. Wait, oh yeah, so you had strip mine. Oh, okay. Yeah, we were strip mining. Beforehand. Fuck this. There we go. I don't want to like stop it if I just can help it. You already have to turn once. Let me do it again. That's for that one, can it? So yes, hello, I'm back once again. Apologies for my swoop that I had did not agree with me. Well, anyway, we'll continue. Well, we are still at 11 here. Diamond, give me 4 diamonds. Really? Fortune's in this, right? Maybe we should just a bit of diamond. We got enough to. If I go back and just make a little bit of get a little bit of obsidian in this place. Perhaps. What is it? 4 that I need for enchanting. You know, I could see if I can get fortune. That'd be nice. And then yeah, diamond is in a much less precarious position. This. Yes, we all need a second one. What did you know? Let's go and do this. We can get enchantments out. I'll see if do it if it is a wait. Maybe we should build a house this time. We keep just living at the hovel, just spending all our time digging. Maybe we should head out and just try and build a house. So that's what we'll do when we get up. We'll put our stuff here. We've got enough stuff to start. We'll have to find a kettle, but you know that's shouldn't be that difficult. While we've still not got too much stuff to move, you know we've got enough that we won't immediately die. We can head out. Let's go actually make a house. Oh, I didn't move my thing back on. But that. This fruit, we're back in Minecraft. Did some stuff. I accidentally missed the bloody thing. I forgot to switch it back when I came back the second time. It's unfortunately. So let's go heads up. We'll drop our stuff away in the chest and see if we can find where you want to start dropping a house down. And I see what videos I've got to make it out of. Yeah, I've got a few ideas of what to do with it. It's a diamond, I think just go in here with you and knows what it is, honestly. Got all this, we'll get wood when we need to. Time of day out there, is it just getting daylight or is it just getting dark? Stuff to my. Oh, right, let's go and get some wood for our house and find a location. I want some of this wood actually for like roofing or something. I want darker wood. But I've got some idea what they want to do for the house. We shall have to see. How it comes out. Lovely. It'll keep going down. There we go. I don't know how big it is. What I want to do, so I'll have to start with experimenting with the corner. No, I didn't finish that one. Okay, you know what? So I'm gonna just end the stream here. I might stream again a bit today, might be tomorrow, but I think that's the end today. So thank you all for coming. We didn't die this time, which is a plus. we'll pick up where we left off and build our actual house. So yeah, thank you for playing, and I will see you next time.